My son and my daughter-in-law brought me to a five-star hotel for the first time. We stayed there all weekend. But then he said, "Thanks for the stay, Mum," and ran off, leaving me without any money to pay the bill. Suddenly, the elderly receptionist came out from behind the counter and asked, "Are you Mr. Harrison's daughter? I worked for your father for 33 years. Before he died, he told me, 'Give this envelope to my daughter when you see her.' When I opened the envelope, I was speechless because my son had planned this whole thing from the beginning, and what I discovered inside changed my life forever. Let me tell you how I arrived at that nightmare moment. 2 weeks ago, Michael called me with a voice I hadn't heard since he was a kid. Excited, warm, like he actually cared. "Mum, I want to take you somewhere special. Danielle and I want to thank you for everything you've done for us." My hands trembled, holding the phone. 66 years of life, working silently, raising that man with my own broken hands. And never, never had I heard words like that come out of his mouth. "I booked an amazing hotel, 5 stars. Mum, you are going to have your own suite, spa, gourmet restaurant, all inclusive. It's your gift. You deserve it." I closed my eyes and the tears just rolled down. I thought that finally, after so many years of sacrifice, of sleepless nights cleaning other people's houses, of shattered knees scrubbing floors to pay for his college, my son saw me. He valued me. He loved me. How stupid I was. Friday morning, Michael and Danielle picked me up in a shiny black sedan. She wore a champagne-coloured dress that probably cost more than my rent for 3 months. He had on expensive sunglasses and that perfect smile he always wore when he wanted something. But I didn't know that then. I only saw my son, successful, elegant, finally proud of his mother. The hotel was a palace, towering marble columns, floors so shiny you could see your reflection, crystal chandeliers that seemed to rain down golden light. The smell of jasmine and expensive wood floated in the air. I had never stepped foot in a place like that. I felt small, out of place, in my old brown dress and my worn-out shoes. But Michael took my arm and whispered, "Relax, Mum. You are just as important here as anyone." Danielle was smiling next to me, perfect, made up like a magazine model. "Sandra, you are going to love the suite. It has a garden view, a jacuzzi tub, everything." Her voice was sweet like poisoned honey, but I didn't know it. I only felt gratitude, happiness, that warm feeling in my chest, thinking that maybe, just maybe, my life was finally getting better. The suite was bigger than my entire apartment, a huge bed with white sheets that looked like clouds, giant windows that overlooked a garden full of red and yellow flowers, a cream-coloured sofa where 3 people could sleep, and the bathroom. My God. The bathroom had pearl-coloured tiles, mirrors with golden lights, towels so soft they made me want to cry. I sat on the bed and touched the sheets with trembling hands. This was real. My son had brought me here. He loved me. The weekend was a dream. Breakfasts with exotic fruits I'd never tasted, lunches in the restaurant where the waiters treated you like a queen. Michael ordered wine. Danielle laughed that crystalline laugh, and I felt part of something beautiful. For the first time in decades, I didn't think about debt, bills, or the pain in my back. Only that moment of false peace existed. Saturday night, we had dinner on the hotel terrace. The lights of Los Angeles shone in the distance like fallen stars. Michael raised his glass and said, "To you, Mum, for everything you sacrificed for me." Danielle applauded. I cried. We toasted. And as the sweet wine went down my throat, I didn't know I was swallowing my own destruction. Sunday morning, Michael told me to come down to the lobby at 11. We'll check out together. Don't worry, Mum. I went down right on time, with my small suitcase and my heart full. He and Danielle were already there, talking to the blonde receptionist. I walked over, smiling. Michael saw me, hugged me tight, and whispered, "Thanks for the stay, Mum. It was an unforgettable weekend." Then he put the bill in my hands. $11,000. And he left. They walked away slowly, as if they were strolling in a park. Michael with his hands in his pockets, Danielle with her designer purse hanging from her shoulder, both laughing softly, whispering things to each other. I watched them pass through the hotel's glass doors, get into that shiny black sedan, and disappear into the morning traffic of Los Angeles. Just like that. As if nothing happened. As if I weren't his mother. As if the last 3 days hadn't existed. My legs stopped responding. The paper with the bill was shaking so much in my hands that the numbers became blurry. $11,000. 11,000. I made $800 a month cleaning houses. $11,000 was more than a year of my life working until my back broke. And my son knew it. He knew exactly how much I earned, how much I had, how much I didn't have. He knew I couldn't pay that. Never could. The blonde receptionist cleared her throat softly from the counter. "Ma'am, will you be paying in cash or with a card?" Her voice was kind, professional, but there was something in her eyes. Pity. She was watching my humiliation in real time and trying to be polite about it. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. Only a choked gasp, as if someone had kicked me in the stomach. Around me, the lobby was still alive. A young couple laughed next to the marble fountain. A man in a suit talked on the phone in English, gesturing with his free hand. A family with small children dragged suitcases toward the elevator. Everyone living their normal lives while mine was falling apart in pieces right in front of them. I felt heat on my cheeks, pure humiliation running through me like liquid fire. I don't have it." The words came out broken, barely a whisper. The receptionist tilted her head, waiting. Her pink nails tapped softly on the keyboard. "Ma'am, if there's a problem, I can call the manager." Problem, that small word to describe the abyss I had just fallen into. My son had abandoned me in a luxury hotel with no way to pay. He had used me. He had brought me here knowing exactly what he was going to do, planning it, enjoying it. The tears began to fall without permission, thick, hot, loaded with rage and shame. The guests started to look at me, some with curiosity, others quickly looking away, embarrassed to witness something so intimate and painful. The receptionist grew nervous. "Ma'am, please, calm down. Please, calm. We'll figure this out." But her voice sounded hollow. There was no solution. I didn't have $11,000. I didn't even have 1,000. I barely had enough for the bus ride home. Suddenly I heard slow steps, dragging across the marble. Steps of someone older. I looked up with soaked eyes and saw an elderly woman coming out from behind the counter. She must have been over 80 years old. Completely white hair pulled back in a bun, deep wrinkles that told decades of stories, and honey-coloured eyes that looked at me with a strange intensity. She wore the hotel uniform, but hers was different. Older, as if she had been wearing the same fabric for 30 years. She approached me with short but firm steps. The blonde receptionist looked at her, surprised. "Emma, you don't have to—" But the elderly woman raised a wrinkled hand, silencing her. "Emma?" That name didn't mean anything to me then. The elderly woman stopped in front of me, so close I could smell her soft perfume of lavender and thyme. She studied my face as if she were looking for something specific. Her eyes scanned my features with a mixture of astonishment and sadness. "You are Mr. Harrison's daughter." Her voice was raspy but firm. The question hit me like a punch to the chest. "Harrison, my father." No one had said that name in front of me for more than 30 years. He had died when I was 35, leaving me alone with a small child and no inheritance. Only blurry memories of a serious man who worked too much and spoke little. "Yes, yes, I am his daughter." My voice came out broken, confused. How did this woman know who my father was? Emma closed her eyes for a moment, as if she were holding back a huge emotion. Then she opened them, and a solitary tear rolled down her wrinkled cheek. "I worked for your father for 33 years, from the time I was 20 until the day he died." The lobby seemed to freeze. The sounds became distant. Only she and I existed in that suspended moment. "Your father was a great man, difficult, demanding, but great. I was the housekeeper in his house. I cleaned, cooked, took care of his things." Her voice trembled with every word, loaded with a weight I didn't understand. "Before he died, he called me to his bed. He was very sick. He could barely speak. He took my hand and told me something I never forgot." Emma reached into the pocket of her uniform and pulled out a yellowed envelope, folded, battered by the years. The corners were worn, the ink on the front almost erased. But there, in shaky handwriting, was my name, Sandra. He told me, "Emma, someday my daughter is going to come here. She is going to be alone. She is going to be lost. When you see her, give her this. It is the only thing I can give her now." She held the envelope out to me with trembling hands. I looked at it without daring to touch it. He knew I would work here. He arranged for me to be hired at this hotel 30 years ago. He told me to wait, that someday you would arrive. And here you are. Her voice broke completely. After 33 years, I can finally fulfill my promise. I took the envelope with numb fingers. It was heavy. Something solid was inside. Something more than paper. I opened it slowly, feeling every second stretch like hot rubber. Inside was a folded letter and an old, rusted metal key. The key had a number engraved on it, 447, and hanging from it was a small leather tag with a handwritten address. I unfolded the letter. My father's handwriting. That slanted writing I remembered from the few times he signed documents at home. The words hit me like stones. "Sandra, if you are reading this, it is because you finally discovered that nothing in our family was what it seemed. Forgive me for the secrets. Forgive me for leaving you without explanation. This key opens a storage unit at the address Emma will give you. Inside, you will find the truth about who I really was, and about who you are. Go alone. Trust only yourself. Your father, Robert Harrison." I read the letter 3 times in a row, but the words still made no sense. Secrets. Truth. Who I really was. Every sentence was an enigma wrapped in fog. My father had been a quiet, hard-working man who left early and came home late. He never talked about his job. He never shared anything personal. When he died, I expected some small inheritance, something to help me raise Michael. But there was nothing. Only debts that I had to pay by selling the few pieces of furniture that were left. And now, 30 years later, a rusted key and a letter telling me that everything had been a lie. I looked up at Emma. She was watching me with those honey-coloured eyes full of something that seemed like pity, barely mixed with urgency. "What is in that storage unit?" My voice sounded louder than I expected, cutting the thick silence that surrounded us. Emma shook her head slowly. "I don't know. Your father never told me. He only asked me to give this to you when I saw you lost and alone. And here you are." I looked again at the leather tag hanging from the key. The address was written in almost faded black ink. Industrial Street 447, Warehouse 12, East Side. I knew that area. It was an abandoned part of the city, full of old warehouses and broken streets where no one went after sundown. A dark, forgotten place, perfect for hiding secrets you didn't want anyone to find. "Ma'am." The voice of the blonde receptionist abruptly brought me back to reality. "And the hotel bill." She was still standing there, holding that paper with $11,000 that I couldn't pay. The humiliation hit me again, but now there was something more. Rage. A cold, sharp rage that grew in my chest like cutting ice. My son had done this to me. He had brought me here knowing exactly what was going to happen, planning it. Emma turned to the receptionist with an authority I didn't expect from someone so old. "I will take care of the lady's bill. Put it in my name. I will pay it in installments from my salary." The receptionist opened her mouth to protest, but Emma silenced her with a look. "Your father saved my life more times than I can count. This is the least I can do for his daughter." I didn't know what to say. The words were stuck in my throat. This woman, this stranger who had kept a secret for 3 decades, was paying my debt. A debt my own son had created to destroy me. "I can't accept this." Emma took my hands in hers, wrinkled and cold. "Yes, you can. And you are going to. But first, you are going to go to that address. You are going to open that storage unit, and you are going to find out why your son did what he did." Her words chilled my blood. "What do you mean?" Emma squeezed my hands with surprising strength. "Your father told me things before he died. Things about your family, about secrets he kept buried his whole life. And he told me that someday, someone would come looking for that truth. Someone of your blood. But he didn't expect it to be you who needed it. He expected it to be another." A shiver ran down my spine. "Who else knew about this?" Emma let go of my hands and took a step back, as if saying the next thing cost her physical effort. "Your son was here 6 months ago. He asked for me. He said he was researching his grandfather's life for a family project. I told him I had worked for Mr. Harrison, that I knew him well. He asked me many questions, too many, about properties, about money, about inheritances." The world tilted under my feet. Michael had been here. He had talked to Emma. He had investigated my father. 6 months ago. 6 months of planning this. Planning to bring me here, humiliate me, leave me with nothing. But why? What had he discovered that I didn't know? "What did you tell him?" My voice was barely a trembling whisper. Emma lowered her gaze, ashamed. "I told him your father had properties, that he had left things unresolved. I didn't give him details, but it was enough. I saw how his eyes lit up. Pure greed. And I knew I had made a mistake. I felt nauseous. My son had come here, had manipulated this elderly woman to get information, and then had designed this whole thing. The trip to the hotel, the luxuries, the fake smiles, all to leave me in ruins while he looked for what my father had hidden. "I need to go to that storage unit." The words came out firm, loaded with a determination I didn't know I had. Emma nodded slowly. "Go now, before he gets there first. Because if Michael finds out where it is, he won't leave you anything." I left the hotel like a sleepwalker, the key clenched in my fist until the metal cut my skin. The midday sun hit my face, blinding me for a moment. The city kept moving, indifferent to my pain. Cars sped past. People walked hurriedly. Street vendors shouted their products. And I stood there, holding onto a rusted key and a truth I still didn't understand. I took a bus toward the east side. The trip lasted almost an hour. I sat next to the window, watching how the city changed from clean, modern buildings to old constructions with graffiti and broken windows. The streets became narrower, dirtier, more dangerous. When I reached my stop, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky orange and dark violet. Industrial Street 447 was exactly as I remembered it from decades ago. An endless row of rusted metal warehouses with corroded doors and huge padlocks. Some had broken windows. Others were completely sealed. Weeds grew between the cracks in the pavement. Trash accumulated in the corners. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant sound of dogs barking. I walked slowly, counting the numbers on the doors. Warehouse 8, Warehouse 9, Warehouse 10. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Finally, I arrived. Warehouse 12. A dark grey metal door, taller than me, with a huge padlock that seemed not to have been touched in decades. Thick cobwebs hung from the corners. Dust covered every inch. I took the key out of my pocket. My hands were trembling so much that it took me 3 tries to get it into the lock. When it finally went in, the metal screeched with a sharp sound that gave me goosebumps. I turned the key slowly. The padlock opened with a dry click that echoed in the silence. I took off the padlock and let it fall to the ground. Then, with both hands, I pushed the door. It opened slowly, grinding as if it were screaming in pain. A blast of cold, damp air came out from inside, bringing with it the smell of mildew, rusted metal, and something else. Something old. Something that had been waiting to be discovered for 30 years. I looked inside. Total darkness. Only shadows dancing in the gloom. I reached for my cell phone, turned on the flashlight, and took the first step toward the truth my father had buried. And what I saw inside made me realize that my life would never be the same. My cell phone light cut through the darkness in a trembling beam that barely illuminated 6 feet ahead. The inside of the warehouse smelled of abandonment, of years of accumulated silence between cold metal walls. My footsteps echoed against the cracked concrete floor, each echo multiplying until it became ghostly whispers. I advanced slowly, sweeping the light across every corner, every shadow that seemed to move. The space was larger than I imagined. About 65 feet long, maybe 30 feet wide. The walls were covered with rusted metal shelves, full of cardboard boxes rotted by humidity. Some had collapsed, spilling their contents onto the floor. Yellowed papers, destroyed folders, blurry photographs. In the center of the warehouse was an old wooden table, covered in dust so thick it looked like grey velvet. And on that table, perfectly centered, as if someone had left it there yesterday, was a large, thick manila envelope, intact, dust-free, as if time hadn't touched it. I approached slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. This didn't make sense. Everything else in the warehouse was destroyed by decades of abandonment, but that envelope looked new. Someone had been here. Recently. I reached out my trembling hand and picked it up. It was heavy, full of more than just paper. I opened it carefully and poured its contents onto the table. Documents. Dozens of documents. Property deeds, birth certificates, death certificates, old black and white photographs, and a brown leather notebook with folded corners. I gripped the phone light between my teeth to free my hands and started to look through them. The first deed was for a house in the center of the city. Address, Liberty Avenue 328, registered in the name of Robert Harrison, my father. Date, 1982. I had never seen that address. I never knew my father owned properties beyond the humble house where I grew up. I checked the next document. Another property, and another, and another. 5 houses in total, all in expensive areas of the city, all registered during the 1970s and 1980s. How was this possible? My father worked in a textile factory. He earned enough to support us. But there were never any luxuries, never any vacations, or new cars, or expensive clothes. My mother sewed our skirts from scraps. I wore shoes until the soles fell off. And my father had 5 properties? My hands trembled, holding those papers that rewrote my entire family history. I picked up one of the birth certificates. The name stopped my heart. Ramon Harrison Delgado. Date of birth, April 15th, 1968. Father's name, Robert Harrison. Mother's name, Victoria Delgado. I read the document 3 times, but the words didn't change. My father had another child, a son who was born 6 years before me, a son with another woman, a brother I never knew existed. I searched frantically through the papers. I found another certificate. Gabriela Harrison Torres, born in 1975. Father Robert Harrison, mother Martina Torres. Another daughter, 3 years younger than me. My breathing became ragged, short. My father had another family, maybe 2, maybe more. While I grew up believing we were his only world, he had other children, other women, other parallel lives that never intersected with mine. The photographs confirmed everything. I picked one up and brought it closer to the cell phone light. My father, young, maybe 30 years old, with his arm around a dark-haired woman with a wide smile. She was holding a baby. Behind them, a large house with a garden. In the next photo, my father with another woman, blonde this time, in front of a shiny car. In another, he was alone, standing in front of an office building, wearing a suit and tie. He wasn't a factory worker. He was someone else entirely. I opened the leather notebook with trembling hands. The pages were full of my father's slanted handwriting. They were records, meticulous notes of income and expenses. January of 1978. Rent collection, $3,200. Payment to Victoria, $500. Payment to Ellen, my mother, $400. Savings for new property, $2,300. Page after page, year after year, a cold, calculated record of how he divided his money among his different families. I sank onto the concrete floor, the notebook pressed against my chest. Everything I believed about my father was a lie. He wasn't a humble man who worked hard to support us. He was a businessman who had accumulated properties, renting out houses, exploiting tenants, maintaining multiple families in ignorance. And my mother never knew. She never suspected that the money he gave her was only a fraction of what he really had. But that didn't explain why Michael had done what he did. How had he discovered all this? And why was abandoning me at that hotel part of his plan? I searched through the documents until I found a recent one. A letter dated 7 months ago, written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Dear Michael Henderson, in response to your investigation into the estate of Robert Harrison, I confirm that the mentioned properties are still registered in the name of the deceased. However, there is a sealed will deposited in this notary office that cannot be opened until all legitimate heirs are located and notified. The recognized heirs to date are Ramon Harrison Delgado and Gabriela Harrison Torres. Sincerely, Notary Public Number 47. There it was. Michael had investigated his grandfather, had discovered the existence of the properties, the will, the other heirs, and he had decided that this fortune was his. But to claim it, he needed me, the other legitimate daughter, to disappear or be so destroyed that I couldn't fight legally. That's why the hotel. That's why the humiliation. That's why leaving me without money. He wanted to break me emotionally, ruin me financially, so that when the time came to open that will, I wouldn't have the strength or the resources to claim anything. A metallic sound pulled me out of my thoughts. It came from outside. Footsteps. Someone was walking near the warehouse. I jumped to my feet, put the most important documents in my purse, and turned off the cell phone flashlight. The darkness swallowed me whole. The steps were getting closer, slow, heavy, intentional. They stopped right in front of the warehouse door. "I knew you would come here, Mum." Michael's voice cut through the silence like a knife, icy, without a trace of the fake affection he had used over the weekend. I turned on my phone and pointed the light toward the door. He was there, a silhouette outlined against the orange sunset sky. He no longer wore the expensive sunglasses or the perfect smile. His face was hard, his eyes shining with something dark I had never seen in him before. "Emma told you, didn't she?" The stupid old woman couldn't keep her mouth shut. He took a step inside. I backed away instinctively. "I spent 6 months researching your father. 6 months, discovering that the saintly grandfather I never knew was actually a liar who accumulated a fortune while keeping us in poverty. And now that fortune belongs to me." "He had other children, Michael." My voice sounded firmer than I expected. "There is a will, other heirs. It is not just yours." He let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Those heirs don't know you exist. And if you don't exist legally, you can't claim anything. That's why I needed to destroy you first. Leave you broke, without resources, without dignity, so that when the time comes to open that will, you will be so broken that you can't fight." Danielle appeared behind him, her arms crossed, and that cold expression that I now understood was her true face. "The hotel was my idea," she said with poisonous pride. "An emotional and financial blow at the same time. Elegant, don't you think?" They laughed together, and the sound turned my stomach. My son and his wife had planned this as if it were a game, as if I weren't human, as if my pain were entertainment. "I won't let you keep it." The words came out before I could think them. Michael took another step toward me, and this time his expression became menacing. "You have no choice, Mom. You are already ruined. You are already left with nothing. And when I'm done with you, you won't even have a place to live." But then, from the darkness at the back of the warehouse, a deep, masculine voice cut the air like thunder. "She is not alone." We all froze. The voice had come from the shadows at the back of the warehouse, grave and firm, loaded with authority. I turned the cell phone light toward it, and the figure of a man slowly emerged from the darkness. He was tall, broad-shouldered, maybe about 60 years old. He had closely cropped grey hair, deep wrinkles around his eyes, and a square jaw that was strangely familiar. He wore simple clothes, denim pants, and a dark green shirt, but there was something about his posture that commanded respect. He stopped about 10 feet from us, his arms crossed over his chest. His eyes swept over Michael with contempt, before settling on me with an expression I couldn't decipher. There was pain there, and also recognition. "Who the hell are you?" Michael took a step forward, trying to regain control of the situation, but his voice sounded less sure. The man didn't answer immediately. He just stared at me, studying me as if he were seeing a ghost. "I'm Ray," he finally said, his voice husky. "Ray Harrison, your brother." The world stopped. The words floated in the thick air of the warehouse like dense smoke. Brother. The birth certificate I had seen minutes earlier came to life before my eyes. The son my father had 6 years before me with another woman. The heir Michael mentioned. He was here. He had been waiting in the shadows all this time. It can't be, I whispered, although deep down I knew it was true. Ray took a step toward the light, and I could see him better. He had the same eyes as my father, dark brown, with that penetrating gaze I remembered from when I was a child. The same shape of the nose, the same jawline. It was like seeing my father alive again, but 30 years later. Tears began to blur my vision without permission. Ray took a folded paper from his shirt pocket and held it out to me. 3 months ago, I received a summons from the notary. They told me my father had died 30 years ago and had left a will, that I was one of the heirs. I didn't know anything about this. My mother never spoke to me about Robert Harrison. I never knew my father. I grew up believing he had abandoned me before I was born. I took the paper with trembling hands. It was the same letter I had seen in the documents, the one from the notary office. I started to investigate, Ray continued, his voice loaded with contained emotion. I discovered I had sisters, you, Sandra, and another, Gabriella, who died 10 years ago in an accident. I discovered that our father was a man who maintained parallel lives, that he lied to all of us, that he built a fortune behind our mothers' backs while they worked themselves to death to support us. His voice broke on the last word. I could see the raw pain in his eyes, the same pain I felt. We were children of the same deception, victims of the same man who had given us life but had denied us the truth. When I discovered that this warehouse existed, I came to investigate. I found all the documents, the properties, the accounts, the letters, and I discovered something else. He turned to Michael with a look that could freeze hell. I discovered that your son had been snooping, that he had bribed notary employees to get private information, that he had contacted Emma to get details about the properties, and I understood that he was planning something, so I decided to wait, to watch, to see how far he was capable of going. Ray walked slowly toward Michael, who backed away instinctively. Danielle pressed herself closer to the wall, her previous arrogance evaporating. What I didn't expect was for you to be so cruel, that you would humiliate your own mother in public, that you would leave her broke, without dignity, just to break her emotionally. Ray stopped in front of Michael, much taller, much more imposing. You are worse than our father. He at least had the decency to keep his lies secret. You use them as weapons against the woman who gave you life. Michael tried to regain his defiant posture, but his voice came out trembling. That fortune is mine. I am his grandson. I have more right than you, a bastard who never knew the old man. Ray didn't move, but the tension in his jaw became visible. Legally, we are equal heirs. Sandra, me, and you through your mother. But here is the difference. I didn't come to steal. I came to know the truth, and to make sure no one else suffered for Robert Harrison's secrets. He turned to me, and his expression softened. Sandra, I know this is a lot. I know your world just collapsed. But you need to know something else. He pulled another document from the inside pocket of his shirt. This one was older, yellowed, with official seals. Our father's will was very specific. He divided the properties equally among his legitimate children, but he added a clause. If any of the heirs tries to dispossess another through deceit or violence, they automatically lose their share. The words fell like bombs in the silence of the warehouse. I looked at Michael and saw his face turn pale. Ray continued, implacable. Your son planned to destroy you to take your share. He paid private investigators. He bribed employees. He conspired to leave you in financial and emotional ruins. Everything is documented. I made sure to collect every piece of evidence over the last 3 months. He took out his cell phone and started scrolling through photographs. Emails between Michael and a private investigator, bank transfers to corrupt notary employees, text messages between him and Danielle, planning every detail of the weekend at the hotel. Everything was there. Every step of their cruel plan captured in digital evidence that would destroy them legally. According to the clause in the will, Michael loses all rights to the inheritance. And you, Danielle. He looked at my daughter-in-law with absolute coldness. As an accomplice, you won't see a cent either. Danielle let out a choked cry. This is a setup. You can't prove it. Ray smiled without humor. I can, and I will. I have already delivered copies of all this evidence to the notary in charge of the will. The legal hearing is in 2 weeks. By then, you two will not only lose the inheritance, you will face charges for fraud, emotional extortion, and conspiracy. Michael exploded. You are a meddling bastard. This is not your problem. She is my mother, not yours. He took a threatening step toward Ray, but Ray didn't flinch. Exactly. She is your mother, the woman who raised you, who sacrificed for you, who gave you everything she had, and you repaid her with betrayal. That makes you something worse than a thief. It makes you a monster. The silence that followed was so dense it could be physically felt. Michael trembled with impotent rage. Danielle cried against the wall, her mask of perfection completely destroyed. And I stood there, trying to process that in a single afternoon I had lost my son, but I had gained a brother, that my father was a liar, but he had the foresight to protect us from the grave, that everything I thought I knew about my family was false. Ray approached me and put a large, rough hand on my shoulder. I know it hurts. Believe me, I do. I went through the same thing 3 months ago. Discovering your whole life was built on lies is like dying and being reborn at the same time. But there is something you need to understand. His voice became softer, almost tender. Our father was a terrible man, but we don't have to be. We can choose what to do with what he left us. I don't want that fortune. The words came out of my mouth before I could think them. Ray nodded slowly as if he had expected exactly that answer. Me neither. At least not all of it. That's why I have a proposal. But first, we need to finish this. He turned to Michael one last time. You have 2 options. You leave here now. You stay away from your mother forever. And maybe, just maybe, I won't press criminal charges. Or you try to fight this legally, and I will make sure you spend the next few years in a cell. Michael looked at me with pure hatred. There was no trace of the son I once loved. Only a cruel stranger who had used my love as a weapon. This doesn't end here. He spat the words like venom. He grabbed Danielle by the arm, and they both left the warehouse, their steps echoing against the metal until they faded into the distance. And then, for the first time all afternoon, Ray and I were alone. The silence that remained after Michael and Danielle left was different. It wasn't oppressive or menacing. It was strange, loaded with unanswered questions and half-discovered truths. Ray remained standing in front of me, his hands in his pockets, looking at me with a mixture of curiosity and caution. As if I were a wounded animal that could attack or flee at any moment. And maybe he was right. I didn't know what to feel. I didn't know if I should cry, scream, or just sink to the floor and give up. How did you know I would be here today? My voice sounded husky, worn out by so many emotions in so few hours. Ray shrugged and leaned against one of the rusted shelves. I didn't know for sure, but I knew your son's plan. I knew he would bring you to the hotel, that he would abandon you, and I assumed Emma would keep her promise. So I've been coming here every afternoon for the last 2 weeks, waiting. Today was the day. 2 weeks. This man, this stranger who shared my blood, had spent 2 weeks waiting in an abandoned warehouse to protect me from a danger I didn't even know existed. Why? The question came out barely as a whisper. Why do you care what happens to me? You don't know me. We don't know each other. Ray looked away toward the shadows at the back of the warehouse, and for a moment I thought he wouldn't answer. Because I spent 58 years believing I was alone in the world, he finally said, his voice loaded with an old, deep sadness. My mother died when I was 19. I never had siblings. I never had family beyond her. And when I discovered I had sisters, that there were people in the world I shared blood with, I felt something I had never felt before. Hope. The possibility of not being alone. He turned to me, and his eyes shone with contained tears. Gabriella is already gone. Only you and I were left. And I wasn't going to let your son rob you before we could meet. The tears I had been holding back finally poured out. Thick, hot, unstoppable. I cried for my lost son, for my lying father, for my mother who died without knowing the truth. For all the years Ray and I had lived apart, ignorant of each other's existence. I cried until there were no more tears, only dry sobs that shook my entire body. And Ray walked over and hugged me. He didn't say anything. He didn't try to comfort me with empty words. He just held me while I fell apart, his embrace firm and warm, smelling of simple soap and honesty. And in that embrace from a stranger who was my brother, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Security. The feeling that someone was on my side unconditionally, without hidden agendas, without betrayals waiting in the shadows. When I finally calmed down, Ray let go of me and pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket. I took it and wiped my face, ashamed that I had broken down like that. I'm sorry, I murmured. He shook his head. Don't apologize. You have the right to cry. You have the right to feel everything you are feeling. I cried for weeks when I discovered the truth about our father. He crouched down and picked up the leather notebook that I had dropped on the floor. He opened it to a marked page and showed it to me. Look at this. Here is the proof of who Robert Harrison really was. I brought the cell phone light closer. It was a journal entry dated 1985. Victoria threatened today to tell everything if I don't give her more money. I gave her $500 extra to shut her up. Ellen suspects something. I must be more careful. The properties are generating good income. Soon I can buy the 5th house. I read entry after entry, each one colder and more calculating than the last. My father didn't write about love or regret. He wrote about money, control, manipulation, how to keep his women separate, how to ensure none of his children knew each other, how to maximize his profits from the properties while giving us the bare minimum to survive. It was a meticulous record of a double, triple life, maintained with the precision of an accountant and the coldness of a con artist. He was a monster, I said, and the words burned my throat. Ray closed the notebook slowly. He was human, a selfish, cowardly, and cruel human, but human nonetheless. He sat down on the concrete floor, leaning his back against the wall, and motioned for me to sit beside him. I did, too tired to keep standing. You know what the saddest thing is, Ray continued, that in the end, with all his money and his properties and his secrets, he died alone in a hospital. None of his women were there. None of his children were with him. Only Emma, the employee he paid to keep his lies. Emma took care of him until the end, I remembered the elderly woman's words in the hotel lobby. Ray nodded. She was the only loyal person he had. And it wasn't even for love. It was for misguided loyalty and the 33 years of salary he gave her. But at least he had the decency to fulfill his last wish, to give you that envelope, to make sure you knew the truth. We sat in silence for several minutes. The warehouse was cold, the humidity seeping through the cracks in the metal. But there was something comforting about sharing that desolate space with someone who understood exactly what I was feeling. You said you had a proposal. I finally broke the silence. Ray straightened up and looked me directly in the eyes. The 5 properties our father left are worth approximately $800,000 in total. According to the will, we are each entitled to $400,000. It is money neither of us needed, but which we now have. He paused, choosing his words carefully. My proposal is this. We sell the properties. We take that money and use it to do something our father never did. Something good. Like what? Ray smiled for the first time since I met him, and that smile completely transformed his face. Emma needs money for her old age. She has worked her whole life and barely has enough to survive. We will give her $50,000. It's the least we can do for the woman who kept our father's secrets, but in the end, helped us find each other. I nodded slowly. That made sense. It was fair. The rest we divide, but not to spend it on ourselves. We use it to help other people. We can create a fund for single mothers who work cleaning houses, like our mothers. Women who are raising children alone, breaking their backs to give them an education. We give them scholarships. We give them opportunities. We do something meaningful with that dirty money. His eyes shone with intensity. We turn the legacy of a liar into hope for people who really need it. Tears returned, but this time they were different. They were not of pain, but of something akin to peace. Our father used that money to control and hurt, I said slowly. We will use it to free and heal. Ray extended his hand toward me. Do you agree? I took his hand, rough and strong, and shook it firmly. I agree. We got up from the floor, shaking off the dust and dampness. Ray began to gather the documents scattered on the table, organizing them into neat piles. We will need a lawyer, someone to help us with the legal process of the will and the sale of the properties. I nodded. I know someone, a neighbor who is a lawyer. She was always good to me. Ray smiled. Perfect. Tomorrow we start the paperwork. Tomorrow. The word sounded strange. A few hours ago, I didn't have a tomorrow. I was destroyed, abandoned, without a future. And now I had a brother, a plan, and something like a purpose. Ray, I said as we walked toward the warehouse exit. Thank you for waiting for me, for protecting me, for everything. He stopped at the door and looked at me with those eyes that were like my father's, but completely different in their warmth. Don't thank me. We are family, and real family doesn't abandon you in a hotel lobby with a bill you can't pay. Real family waits in abandoned warehouses for 2 weeks just to make sure you are okay. His voice broke a little. I spent my whole life without siblings. Now that I've found you, I'm not going to leave you alone, ever again. We left the warehouse together. The sky was completely dark now, dotted with stars that shone like promises. Ray closed the metal door and put the padlock back on. This place has already fulfilled its purpose, he said. We don't need to come back here anymore. We walked down the deserted industrial street, our steps synchronized without planning it. Ray walked me to the bus stop. The street was deserted, lit only by old lampposts that flickered with yellowish light. The cold of the night was beginning to seep through my clothes, and I hugged myself, trying to conserve warmth. He took off his denim jacket without saying anything, and put it over my shoulders. It smelled of cheap detergent and honesty, so different from Michael's expensive perfumes and lies. "Where do you live?" Ray asked, his hands now in his pants pockets. I gave him my address. It was an old building on the north side, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I had paid for it with 30 years of hard work. "It's far. I'll take you." I shook my head. "I don't want to bother you anymore." He let out a short laugh. "Sandra, I just spent 2 weeks waiting in an abandoned warehouse. Taking you home is no bother." His pickup truck was parked 2 blocks away. It was old, dirty white, with dents in the doors and a cracked windshield in one corner. But it started on the first try, purring with an engine that sounded well-maintained. I got into the passenger seat and buckled my seatbelt, while Ray turned on the heater. The interior smelled of old coffee and the cheap air fresheners that hung from the rear-view mirror. He drove in silence for the first few minutes, concentrating on the city's night traffic. I looked out the window, watching the industrial streets gradually transform into residential areas. Families eating dinner behind lit windows, kids playing on the sidewalks under their parents' supervision. Normal lives, simple, honest. Everything I thought I had, and that turned out to be a carefully constructed illusion. "What do you do for work?" Ray's question pulled me out of my thoughts. "I clean houses, 5 days a week, sometimes 6 if I need extra cash." My voice sounded tired even to my own ears. Ray nodded slowly. "My mother cleaned houses too. She worked until the cancer left her so weak she couldn't even hold a broom. She died with shattered hands and a broken back. She was 48 years old." The pain in his voice was so raw that it hurt my chest. "My mother died at 52. Diabetes. She didn't have money for medicine. She kept working until she collapsed at one of her clients' houses. The owner didn't even call an ambulance. She just called me to come pick her up because she was dirtying her marble floor." The words came out bitter, loaded with a rage I had kept for 14 years. Ray hit the steering wheel with the palm of his hand, not hard, but with impotent frustration. "Our mothers killed themselves working while our father accumulated properties. He could have helped them. He could have given us better lives. But he chose secrecy and control above everything else." He rubbed his eyes with one hand, as if trying to erase painful images. "That's why I want to use that money to help other women, so that no other mother has to die cleaning the floors of people who don't even see her as human." "What do you do for work?" I asked, needing to shift the weight of the conversation a little. Ray smiled sadly. "I'm a mechanic. I have a small shop on the south side. I fix old cars, the ones people with money no longer want. I don't earn much, but it's honest. Every cent that comes into my pocket, I earned with my own hands, not by stealing from anyone or lying to anyone." There was pride in his voice, a genuine pride that my son never had. Michael. The thought of him pierced me like a knife. My son. The child I raised, who I fed with food I didn't eat so he wouldn't go hungry. The child I walked to school every day for 12 years, walking in the sun and rain because we didn't have money for the bus. The child who cried in my arms when he had his first heartbreak, when he failed a test, when he felt rejected by the world. That child had become a cruel stranger who used me as a disposable tool. "Do you think he will come back?" The question came out before I could stop it. Ray didn't answer immediately. He kept driving, his hands firm on the steering wheel, his gaze fixed on the road. "Honestly, I don't know. Greed does strange things to people. He might accept that he lost and disappear, or he might try something desperate." He looked at me out of the corner of his eye. "That's why I want you to have this." He took something from the compartment between the seats and handed it to me. It was a card with his phone number handwritten on it. If Michael tries to contact you, if he threatens you, if you feel you are in danger, you call me immediately, no matter the time, no matter the day. You call me, and I will go. The seriousness in his voice left no room for doubt. This man, who had only known me for a few hours, was willing to protect me, while my son, who had shared my life for 38 years, had planned my destruction. I put the card in my purse along with the documents from the warehouse. Ray, there's something I don't understand. He looked at me briefly before returning his gaze to the road. Why did our father write that will that way, with that clause about heirs trying to deceive others? If he spent his whole life lying and manipulating, why put a moral rule in his will? Ray exhaled slowly. I've thought a lot about that. I think in the end, when he knew he was dying, he had a moment of clarity, or maybe cowardice. He didn't have the courage to tell us the truth in life, but he wanted to make sure that after his death, none of his children would destroy each other for his dirty money. It was his twisted way of protecting us, not from ourselves, but from each other. One last manipulation, I said bitterly. Even from the grave, he kept controlling. Ray nodded. But this time, his manipulation protected us. Without that clause, your son would have won. He would have destroyed you legally and kept everything. Our father, for the first time in his selfish life, did something that benefited us, even if it was by accident. We arrived at my building 20 minutes later. It was a grey, concrete block of 5 stories, with small balconies full of hanging laundry and pots with half-dead plants. It wasn't pretty, but it was home. Ray turned off the engine and turned to me. Will you be okay tonight? The question was loaded with genuine concern. I nodded, although I wasn't sure if it was true. I'll be fine. I have a lot to think about, but I'll be fine. I got out of the truck and returned his jacket. He took it, but didn't move. Sandra, tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, I have an appointment with my lawyer. Can you come? I want you to be there when we start the will process. I hesitated for a moment. Tomorrow I had work, 3 houses to clean. But this was more important. This was the future. I'll be there. Give me the address. Ray took out his cell phone and sent me the location by message. Then he got out of the truck and walked around the vehicle to where I was. He gave me a quick but firm hug. But Boatsen, you are going to get through it. All of this. The pain, the betrayal, the confusion. You are going to get through it because you are stronger than you think. He separated and looked me in the eyes. And you are not alone. Not anymore. You have me now. I climbed the stairs to my apartment on the 3rd floor. Every step was an effort after the longest day of my life. I opened the door and entered my small 2-room space. Everything was exactly as I had left it Friday morning, before Michael picked me up to take me to the hotel. The unwashed coffee cup in the sink, the newspaper open on the table, my unmade bed, as if time had frozen. But I was not the same person who had left that apartment 3 days ago. That Sandra was naive. She still believed in her son. She still lived in the illusion of a loving family. This Sandra knew the truth. About her father, about her son, about the fragility of blood ties when money and greed intervened. But she also knew something new. That family doesn't always come from where you expect. Sometimes it comes in the form of a brother you never knew, waiting in an abandoned warehouse to make sure you are okay. I collapsed onto the sofa without even taking off my shoes. The exhaustion was total, physical and emotional. I closed my eyes, and for a moment only the silence of my apartment and the slow beating of my heart existed. Tomorrow, the legal process would begin, Tomorrow I would face the consequences of everything I had discovered. But tonight, I just needed to breathe. My cell phone vibrated in my purse. I took it out expecting a message from Ray. But it wasn't him. It was Michael. The message shone on my cell phone screen like an open wound. Mum, we need to talk. Please give me a chance to explain. It's not what you think. I love you. Your son, Michael. I read the words once, twice, 3 times. Each reading turned my stomach harder. I love you. Those 2 words that had meant everything to me for 38 years now sounded hollow, empty, like fake coins trying to pass for gold. My fingers trembled over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to answer. The part that was still a mother, that remembered the little boy who used to hug my legs when he was afraid of the dark. But another part, the part that had matured painfully in the last few hours, knew that answering would be opening a door that needed to remain closed. Michael didn't want to explain. He wanted to manipulate. It was the only thing he knew how to do now. I blocked his number. The act was simple, just 3 taps on the screen, but it felt like cutting an umbilical cord that had been connected for almost 4 decades. I cried while doing it. Silent tears that rolled down my cheeks and fell onto the cell phone screen, distorting the letters. I was mourning the death of something that probably never really existed. The son I loved was an illusion. The real man was a cruel stranger. I got up from the sofa and walked to the window. From the 3rd floor I could see the street, half lit by lampposts that needed repair. A stray dog dug through the trash. A young couple walked hand in hand. Life went on, indifferent to my pain. I wondered how many people in those grey buildings were living their own silent tragedies. How many mothers had been betrayed by their children? How many family secrets were hidden behind those lit windows? The cell phone vibrated again. This time it was an unknown number. My heart raced. I hesitated before opening the message. Sandra, it's Danielle. Please listen to me. Michael is desperate. We made a mistake. We can fix this. You would forgive us, wouldn't you? You are his mother. Mothers always forgive. The fury I felt was so intense that I had to sit down to keep from falling. Danielle, the woman who had planned my humiliation as if it were a fun game, was now asking for forgiveness, not out of remorse, but because they had lost. I blocked that number too. Then I turned off the cell phone completely and left it on the table. I needed silence. I needed to think. I walked to my bedroom and collapsed onto the bed without undressing. The sheets smelled of cheap fabric softener and loneliness. I closed my eyes trying to sleep, but my mind was a whirlwind of images and memories that mixed with the recent reality. I saw 5-year-old Michael, crying because the kids at school made fun of his used clothes. I hugged him then and promised him that someday he would have new things. I saw 15-year-old Michael proud when he won his first science award. I had worked a double shift that week to pay for his project materials. I saw 25-year-old Michael introducing me to Danielle, telling me she was the love of his life. I had cried with happiness because I thought my son had found companionship. All those memories were now contaminated. Every hug, every smile, every I love you, Mum now had a shadow of doubt. When did he start to change? When did he stop seeing me as his mother and start seeing me as an obstacle? Was it when he discovered my father's properties? Or was there always something dark in him that I didn't want to see? The questions tormented me without offering answers. Finally, around 3 o'clock in the morning, exhaustion won, and I fell asleep. I dreamed of my father. We were in a house I didn't recognize, huge and empty. He walked ahead of me, always out of reach, no matter how fast I ran. Every room I opened was full of photographs of people I didn't know, whole families smiling at the camera. And in every photograph, my father was there, with his arm around different women, different children, all his secret lives hanging on the walls like trophies. I woke up startled at 6 o'clock in the morning, my heart racing and the sheets soaked with sweat. The grey light of dawn filtered through the window. I got up with an aching body, as if I had fought a physical battle during the night. I went to the bathroom and washed my face with ice-cold water, trying to wake up, to return to reality. The woman looking back at me from the mirror looked 10 years older. Deep, dark circles, cracked lips, more pronounced wrinkles. Pain aged you. I made coffee as the sun finished rising. I sat at the kitchen table, wrapping my hands around the hot mug, letting the steam warm my face. Today I had to go with Ray to the lawyer. Today the process of untangling my father's inheritance officially began. Today I had to be strong. But right now, in the quiet of my kitchen, I allowed myself to be fragile. I allowed myself to feel the full weight of the betrayal. At 8 o'clock, I turned on my cell phone. There were 15 messages from Michael from different numbers. I didn't open them. I deleted them all without reading. There were 5 missed calls from Danielle. I ignored them too. And there was one message from Ray, sent at 7 o'clock in the morning. Good morning. Sandra, I hope you were able to rest a little. I'll be waiting for you at 10 o'clock. We are going to start fixing this together. Your brother, Ray, your brother. Those 2 words filled me with a strange warmth. I had never had siblings. I was always an only child. But now I had Ray, a man who protected me when he could have ignored me, who offered me an alliance when he could have seen me as competition, who called me sister after knowing me for barely a day. Family doesn't always come from the expected place. Sometimes it comes from the shadows of an abandoned warehouse. I showered, put on my most presentable clothes, a dark grey dress I used for special occasions, and carefully did my hair. I needed to look dignified. I needed to feel in control, even if inside I was chaos. At 9:30, I took the bus toward downtown New York, where the lawyer's office was. The journey was long, the morning traffic dense and noisy, but I used that time to prepare myself mentally. Ray was already waiting outside the building when I arrived. He wore black pants and a white shirt, freshly ironed. He looked nervous, but determined. He smiled when he saw me approach. I thought maybe you would change your mind. I shook my head. No, I need to do this. For me, for my mother, for all the truths that were never told. He nodded and offered me his arm. I took it, and together we entered the building. The office was on the 5th floor. Beige walls, framed diplomas, bookcases full of legal codes. The lawyer was a man about 50 years old, with thick glasses and a serious expression. His name was James. He greeted us with a formal handshake and invited us to sit in leather chairs across from his dark wood desk. Mr. Ray explained the basic situation over the phone, James began, opening a thick folder. But I need you to tell me everything from the beginning. Every detail is important. For the next hour, Ray and I told him everything. Our father's secret families, the will with the special clause, Michael's plan to destroy me and keep the inheritance, the evidence Ray had collected, the documents from the warehouse, everything. James took notes meticulously, asking specific questions, requesting clarifications. His face remained neutral, professional, but I could see his eyebrows occasionally rise at the most shocking details. This is complex but manageable, James finally said, closing his notebook. The clause in the will is clear. If we can prove that Michael attempted to dispossess Sandra through deceit, he automatically loses any right to the inheritance. The evidence Ray collected is solid: emails, text messages, bank transfers. It will be enough. He looked at me directly. But I need to ask you something, Ms. Sandra. Are you prepared for this? Proceeding legally means your son will face consequences, possibly criminal charges. Are you ready for that? The question hit me like a punch. Was I ready to see my son face criminal charges? The mother in me screamed no, that we find another way, that I forgive him. But the woman who had been humiliated, betrayed, and used knew there was no other option. I am ready, I said, and my voice sounded firmer than I expected. My son made his choices. Now he must face the consequences. James nodded in approval. He began to explain the legal process to us. First, he would present the evidence to the notary in charge of the will. Then, a formal hearing would be called, where all the heirs would be summoned. Michael would have the opportunity to defend himself, but with the amount of evidence Ray had collected, his options were limited. The entire process will take between 4 and 6 weeks, James said, organizing the documents on his desk. But I can tell you in advance that the result is almost certain. Michael will lose his rights. The inheritance will be divided between the two of you. Ray and I exchanged glances. We want to do something specific with that money, I said. We don't want to keep all of it. We want to create a fund to help single mothers who work cleaning houses, give their children scholarships, financial support, opportunities. James took off his glasses and looked at us with an expression he hadn't shown before. Respect, even admiration. That is extraordinary. I can help you establish a legal foundation. Ensure that the money is used correctly, that it reaches those who really need it. We spent another hour discussing the details. What would the foundation be called? How would we select the beneficiaries? What percentage of the money would be allocated to educational scholarships, and what percentage to direct financial support? Ray suggested calling it the Ellen and Victoria Foundation, in honor of our mothers. I nodded with tears in my eyes. It was perfect. Our mothers, who died broken and forgotten, would now have a legacy that would help other women avoid the same fate. When we left the office, it was almost 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The sun was shining brightly, and the city was bustling with life. Ray invited me to eat something. We found a small family restaurant 2 blocks away, with plastic tables and a handwritten menu on a chalkboard. We ordered turkey chili and soda. We ate in silence for several minutes, each lost in our own thoughts. "Do you think our mothers would be proud?" I finally asked, breaking the silence. Ray put down his spoon and looked at me directly. "I think they would be more than proud. They would be astonished. Their children, who grew up separate, who never knew about each other, found each other and decided to turn pain into hope. That's more than our father did in his whole life." He was right. Our father spent decades accumulating properties and secrets, building walls between his families. We, in less than 24 hours, had decided to tear down those walls and use his resources to build something better. "Are you afraid of the hearing?" Ray asked. I thought about the question honestly. Yes, I will have to see Michael face to face, hear his justifications, his lies, watch him try to manipulate everyone as he always has. But I also know I have to do it. Not for revenge, but for justice, to close this chapter and be able to move forward. Ray nodded slowly. "I will be there, by your side, throughout the hearing. You won't face it alone." We finished eating and walked through downtown New York with no specific destination. We passed by shops, parks, street vendors. People surrounded us, each person living their own complex story. "Do you know what the strangest thing about all this is?" I said as we sat down on a bench under the shade of a huge tree. That if Michael hadn't been so greedy, if he hadn't betrayed me in such a cruel way, I never would have known the truth. I never would have gone to that warehouse. I never would have met you. Ray let out a bitter laugh. It's ironic. His betrayal united us. His plan to destroy you ended up creating something he never expected. A real family. We sat there for almost an hour, just talking, sharing memories of our separate, but strangely similar, childhoods. Our mothers' struggles, the sacrifices, the moments of hunger and cold, the small triumphs we celebrated as if they were huge. We discovered we had more in common than just blood. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal procedures, meetings with James, and preparation for the hearing. Michael tried to contact me countless times. Messages from new numbers, letters left at my door. He even showed up once in front of my building. But I didn't give in. Ray had given me an emergency whistle and the number of a police friend. Every time Michael approached, we documented it. More evidence of harassment for the legal case. Danielle tried a different tactic. She posted a fake story on social media about how I was a cruel mother who was destroying her son for money. Some acquaintances wrote to me asking if it was true. I explained the real situation. Some believed me. Others chose Michael's side. I learned that in times of crisis, you discover who your real friends are. And the list was shorter than I expected. But I also discovered new allies. Emma, the hotel receptionist, visited me one afternoon. She brought homemade cookies and tea. We sat in my small living room, and she cried while asking me for forgiveness for telling Michael information months ago. I didn't know he would use it to hurt you, she sobbed. I thought he was just interested in getting to know his grandfather. I hugged her and told her it wasn't her fault. She had been as much a victim of my father's secrets as any of us. The night before the hearing, I could barely sleep. I got up 3 times to get water. I checked my dark grey dress 5 times to make sure it was clean and ironed. I mentally rehearsed what I would say if I was asked to speak. At 4 o'clock in the morning, I finally gave up and made coffee. I sat by the window watching the city slowly wake up, the sky changing from black to grey to orange. Ray arrived at 8 o'clock to accompany me. He wore a dark suit that looked new, probably bought specifically for this occasion. "Ready?" he asked. I took a deep breath. As ready as I can be. The hearing was at the Notary Building, an old but elegant construction in the historic downtown. We entered a large room with dark wood walls, padded chairs, and a long desk where the notary and lawyers would sit. Michael was already there. He looked haggard, with deep dark circles and a wrinkled suit. Danielle was by his side, perfectly made up, but with a tense expression. When they saw me enter, Michael stood up. "Mum, please," he began, but his lawyer pulled him back down. Ray squeezed my shoulder gently, and we sat on the opposite side of the room. The division was clear. Them on one side, us on the other. The notary entered, an older man with completely white hair and a stern expression. He sat down, reviewed the documents, and began the hearing. Over the next 2 hours, James presented all the evidence. The emails where Michael planned my humiliation, the bank transfers to private investigators, the text messages between him and Danielle, laughing at my naivete, the testimonies from Emma. Everything was there, exposed under the cold light of the legal room. Michael's lawyer tried to argue that everything was a misunderstanding, that his client was only investigating family history, that the hotel incident was a communication error. But his arguments sounded hollow against the mountain of evidence. The notary listened in silence, taking occasional notes, his expression impenetrable. When it was time for the involved parties to speak, Michael stood up. "I just wanted what belonged to me," he said, his voice trembling between rage and desperation. My grandfather was rich and we lived in poverty. Why? Why did he keep all that while my mother cleaned houses until she broke? I had a right to that fortune. I needed it. I deserved it. He looked at me directly. And you, Mum, would never have done anything with that money. You would have wasted it on charity or kept it unused. I was going to do something great with it. I stood up, surprising myself. You are right about one thing, Michael. Your grandfather was rich and kept us in poverty. That was cruel and unfair. But your solution was to repeat his cruelty, to lie, to manipulate, to use people. You became him. My voice cracked, but I continued. I would have given you everything if you had asked me. Everything. But you chose to destroy me instead of trusting me. And that choice says more about who you are than about who your grandfather was. The silence that followed was absolute. Michael slumped into his chair, his head in his hands. Danielle cried silently. The notary closed his folder with a dry thud. I have heard enough. The evidence is clear. Michael Henderson violated the clause of the will that prohibits deceit among heirs. Therefore, he loses all his rights to the inheritance of Robert Harrison. The entirety of the estate will be divided between the remaining legitimate heirs, Sandra Harrison and Ramon Harrison. He hit his wooden gavel against the desk. This hearing is closed. We left the notary office under a bright sun that seemed inappropriately cheerful. Ray hugged me tightly on the sidewalk. You did it. You faced him and won. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty, sad. I had won the legal battle, but I had lost my son. We are going to turn that pain into something beautiful, Ray said, as if he could read my thoughts. We are going to help so many families that your son will never be able to erase the good we will do. 6 months later, the Ellen and Victoria Foundation officially opened. We had sold the 5 properties for a total of $820,000. We gave $50,000 to Emma, who cried for an hour when we handed her the check. The rest we divided. A portion for us to secure our futures, and the largest part for the foundation. In the first year, we granted 30 full scholarships to the children of domestic workers. We helped 50 mothers with emergency rent payments. We financed 3 small businesses for women who wanted to stop cleaning other people's houses. I never spoke to Michael again. I heard through others that he and Danielle divorced 6 months after the hearing, that he moved to another city, that he works in something that doesn't pay well. Part of me still hurts when I think of him. He is my son. That love is not completely erased. But I learned that loving someone doesn't mean allowing them to destroy you. Sometimes the hardest love is the one that is exercised from a distance. Ray became my real family. We eat dinner together every Sunday. We celebrate birthdays. We cry on the anniversaries of our mothers' deaths. And we work together at the foundation, interviewing families, handing out scholarships, watching our father's dirty money finally do some good in the world. One day, while reviewing applications in my small apartment, Ray told me something I will never forget. Our father taught us how not to live. He showed us the wrong path so clearly that we had no choice but to choose the opposite. In that twisted sense, he gave us a gift. He gave us the certainty of what kind of people we didn't want to be. He was right. I didn't want to be like my father, keeping secrets and building empires on lies. I didn't want to be like my son, destroying others for greed. I wanted to be like my mother, like Ray's mother. Women who worked until they broke to give their children something better. Today, 3 years after that afternoon at the hotel where my world collapsed, I look back and see the path clearly. The pain was real. The betrayal was devastating. But from those ashes grew something unexpected. A brotherhood with a man who should have been a stranger, but became my anchor. A foundation that bears the names of two forgotten women and now helps hundreds. And a version of myself that is stronger, wiser, and finally free from the lies that defined my family for generations. My son left me broke at a luxury hotel, but an elderly receptionist gave me an envelope that changed my life. Inside, there was not just the key to a storage unit, there was the key to the truth. And although that truth shattered me, it also freed me. Now I walk through the world without the burden of secrets that were not mine, without the illusion of a perfect family that never existed, only with the imperfect but honest reality of who I am and what I choose to do with the time I have left. And that, I discovered, is worth more than any inheritance.